from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories.
We're close. We're not done yet.
The US president raises hopes of a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, which could see the release of more hostages and prisoners. Israeli strikes continue to target Gaza's southern city of Rafah as the Palestinian death toll nears 30,000. Inevitable conflict with NATO. Russia's warning after the French president raises the possibility of European troops in Ukraine. And female medical students return to classes in Afghanistan as activists call for a wider education ban to be lifted. "40 days of peace." That's reportedly what's at stake in the latest ceasefire talks between Hamas and Israel, which are showing some signs of progress. The draft deal is said to include the release of 40 Israeli hostages in return for 400 Palestinian detainees. US President Joe Biden says agreement is close.
Well, I hope by the beginning of the weekend. The end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
Hamas has described Biden's comments as premature, saying there are still big gaps that need to be bridged before any ceasefire. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates. So, Sarah, let's start with these ceasefire negotiations. What more do we know about this possible truce?
Hi, Robin. Absolutely no comment yet from Israeli officials, despite that optimism that we heard from President Biden in that ice cream shop. The same optimism is really being echoed by the key mediator, also Doha. The foreign ministry held a press conference not so long ago saying they're hopeful that a deal will be done over the next few days. But that optimism is certainly not being felt or reported here in Israel. Hebrew media is reporting, citing a senior Israeli official as saying that he doesn't understand what Biden's optimism is actually based on. Also, another report, this one from the New York Times, is that Israel may be willing to make a significant concession. This could be 15 very high-level Palestinian prisoners for the release of 5 female Israeli soldiers. Still, of course, no confirmation on that one either. But what we do need to remember here, Robin, is that the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he is under a lot of pressure, as we've been hearing day after day, month after month. These far right in his party have been urging him not to make a reckless deal, saying they'll pull out of the government. But there's growing pressure here in Israel on Netanyahu to make a deal. And what we've really been seeing as the main stumbling block here, of course, is the ceasefire. Hamas wants an immediate ceasefire. Israel says that's not going to happen. We're going to continue this operation until, quote, complete victory. And Israel has been saying over the last few days also that even if there is a deal, it will continue this operation in Rafah once this deal, this time frame of this deal has wrapped up.
So, Sarah, pressure from within Israel on Netanyahu to make this deal. Israelis are going to the polls today in municipal elections. Will the results of those have any bearing on Netanyahu's hold on power?
Not directly, but what it will do, Robin, is reflect public sentiment. What we're seeing in a lot of these major cities are far-right candidates, also very extreme religious candidates running up against somewhat moderate voices, and also some of them are critics of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. So that will certainly be very interesting to see. We can expect results through Wednesday morning. Another interesting thing to point out here is that Netanyahu is generally pretty involved in all kinds of campaigning, even these local elections with his Likud party, but he's barely been anywhere to be seen in the run-up to this. One other thing is that it does go to show that elections can actually be held during wartime. This is one thing that the Likud party has been saying shouldn't happen, that would only damage the country. But this is what we've been hearing from the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, calling for elections, calling for Netanyahu to step down. And then finally, Robin, there are these hostage families. They have been shining more light on the plight of these captives, going from polling station to polling station, reminding the public that these people are still in Gaza, holding up signs saying, choose the hostages.
Sarah, thank you very much. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, as negotiators try and pin down a ceasefire and hostage release deal, the Zatmar family in Rafah are among those mourning the death of loved ones after an Israeli strike hit their home. In the past 24 hours, around 100 Palestinians have been killed and 172 injured. The death toll in Gaza is expected to pass 30,000 people in the next couple of days, many of those children.
This happened while we were still preparing and placing our food on the table and sitting to break our fast. Then I don't know how everything happened. We don't know anything. 3 floors completely destroyed. Everything was demolished. You wouldn't know where to go or who to get out or where they are. There are people still under the rubble.
Well, let's go to Gaza now and talk to our correspondent in Rafah, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, 100 Palestinians killed in the past 24 hours. What's been happening?
Well, yes, Israel carried several attacks on the Gaza Strip from its north to its south, and in some highlights here, beginning here in Rafah, the Zatmar family home was targeted, as you mentioned before. This home actually is located just around 300 meters away from my current location. This home is just next to the Al-Kuwaiti hospital, which is located inside the Ash-Shabura refugee camp, and this is such a densely populated area, and it was mentioned several times repeatedly by the Israeli army as a green area where Palestinians should be evacuating to the Ash-Shabura refugee camp. However, yes, an Israeli airstrike hit the Zatmar family home. 8 people were killed while dozens were injured, and until now, around 16 hours after the attack, actually paramedics and civil forces are still trying to evacuate bodies under.
Oh, I think we have unfortunately lost our connection there to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. The United States says its forces have destroyed 2 cruise missiles plus drones in Yemen that were being prepared for attacks in the Red Sea. It marks the latest effort to stop assaults by the Houthis on commercial shipping in the waterway. US authorities claimed that the drones and missiles presented an imminent threat to vessels. Greece is sending a ship to the Red Sea, part of an EU mission to protect commercial traffic. The frigate will join ships from France, Italy and Germany, which are trying to prevent attacks by Yemen's Houthi group. Several Greek-owned commercial vessels have been hit since November. Hundreds of people gathered at a vigil for a US Air Force member who died after setting himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in Washington on Sunday. 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell was heard shouting "Free Palestine" during his act of protest. The Air Force confirmed that Bushnell was a cyber defense operations specialist based in San Antonio in Texas. The Kremlin has warned of inevitable conflict with NATO if members of the alliance send troops to Ukraine. It comes after French President Emmanuel Macron told a gathering of European leaders that sending soldiers to fight in Ukraine couldn't be ruled out.
There was no consensus today to send ground troops, but no option should be excluded. We will do everything to ensure that Russia can't win this war. Russia's defeat is crucial for security and stability in Europe. On the other hand, we have to ensure that Ukraine is able to endure any new Russian offensive over the coming month. But we must also retain the possibility for all Europeans to define their own collective security.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, unlocking the future of learning, how the metaverse could revolutionize classrooms.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. The US president raises hopes of a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, which could see the release of more hostages and prisoners. Israeli strikes continue to target Gaza's southern city of Rafah as the Palestinian death toll nears 30,000. And Russia warns of inevitable conflict with NATO after the French president raises the possibility of European troops in Ukraine. South Korea's president says he won't back down in a dispute with striking doctors. Yoon Suk-yeol has vowed to press ahead with plans to increase the number of students in medical schools. Doctors want the government to address pay and working conditions first, but ministers have threatened them with legal action and loss of their licences. Our correspondent Martin Lowe reports.
There's absolutely no sign of either side softening their position. This is the main government and palace quarter in the capital, Seoul, and the South Korean government has said to the doctors they have 3 days until February the 29th to return to work, or they face having their licenses to practice medicine suspended and possible prosecution in the courts. Now, so far, around 9,000 of the country's 13,000 trainee and junior doctors have walked out. Many have handed in their resignations. The situation is already critical at a number of hospitals. Some have cancelled up to 50% of operations. Others are turning away accident victims. Local media is reporting that a woman in her 80s suffered a cardiac arrest and died after being refused treatment by 7 different hospitals. Other patients claim that they have to go from one hospital to another until they find a hospital that will treat them. Now, people are angry about this. Some of those patients have been quoted as saying this hard-line stance by both sides, the government and the doctors, means that they're playing hostage with people's lives. The main point at issue here is that the South Korean government wants to recruit another 2,000 trainee doctors. That's about a 60% increase on the existing numbers. Now, the government says that's necessary to prepare for the future with a constantly aging population here in this country. But the junior doctors say first they need to address their pay and their career progression during their careers. Most doctors here in South Korea are paid out of private medical insurance. Around 90% of all medical care here is private. But the juniors say simply recruiting a raft of newly qualified physicians will only create a scramble for people who want to work in the most well-paid areas. Here, that's things like skin care and plastic surgery, and that does nothing to address problems in other disciplines like maternity and childcare, which will remain understaffed. Now, the government here has ordered military and police hospitals to open up and treat the general public, and it's told all medical clinics that they have to stay open for longer hours to try to, in some way, address this critical and growing shortage in patient care.
Female medical students in Afghanistan are returning to classes after the ruling Taliban government announced an easing of restrictions. Students and activists have welcomed the move, but secondary schools and universities are still closed to women. Our correspondent Zamarilai Abasin reports from Kabul.
Since seizing control of Afghanistan in mid-August 2021, the Taliban-led government has enforced strict measures, banning girls from secondary schools and universities and prohibiting women from working in both the public and private sectors. Nazanin Sadiq was one of the female students expected to graduate from Kabul Medical University before the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. Her main supporter has always been her father, keen to see his daughter qualify as a doctor. Nazanin, who works part-time with a production company, is the only breadwinner of her family, says she's never given up on her studies and will now continue turning her dreams into a reality by serving her fellow Afghans. She faces many hurdles, but fights for her right to an education every day.
When the universities, secondary schools, and other institutes were closed, we were deeply saddened and many Afghan girls suffered anxiety. Now we're glad the medical institutes are reopening. I hope the universities, and most importantly, the secondary schools, will also be reopened for Afghan girls.
We're thankful for the resumption of training in the medical institutes, but we expect graduates to be able to attend universities to get a higher education and receive expertise in their dedicated field.
The Taliban-led government announced it has begun enrollment for Afghan female students, those who graduated before the Taliban takeover, at medical institutes in 11 provinces across the country. Afghan education activists welcome the step, but say reopening secondary schools and universities for girls is vital, and that the Taliban leadership should revise the decision as soon as possible.
School doors were shut for more than 6 years, 2 years because of the COVID-19 lockdown and almost 3 years since the Taliban's return.
Sharafat Zaman, a spokesperson for the Afghan Health Ministry, however, declined to comment or elaborate on the decision of reopen enrollment for Afghan female students in medical institutes of the country. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, or the UNAMA, has welcomed the Taliban's decision to allow girls to register in medical institutes in 11 provinces of Afghanistan. The organization has urged authorities and the Taliban-led government to recognize the needs of women and girls to have full access to education and learning. Zamarilai Abasin, CGTN, Kabul.
Senegal's leader, Macky Sall, has proposed an amnesty bill to try and calm unrest linked to upcoming elections. He was speaking at talks which have largely been boycotted by opposition and civic groups. The country's been thrown into chaos after Sall postponed elections due to be held last Sunday without setting a new date. The Constitutional Court has ruled that the vote should be held as soon as possible. The amnesty bill has already been condemned by Sall's opponents. Peru has declared a health emergency across most of the country, warning of an imminent outbreak of dengue fever. Case numbers have been rising due to a heat wave and heavy rain. At least 32 people have died. Most cases are in northern Peru, where authorities say that hospitals are overwhelmed. Police in Australia, who've been searching for 2 men believed to have been murdered by a serving police officer, say they found 2 bodies at a remote property. It's thought that the victims, former television presenter Jesse Baird and his boyfriend Luke Davis, were shot over a week ago in Sydney. The suspect was charged last week. New Zealand's government has introduced a bill to dismantle an agency set up to improve healthcare for Indigenous Maori people. The centre-right coalition has vowed to undo policies of previous Labour government, including a rollback on Indigenous rights, official use of the Maori language, and repealing a world-first smoking ban. Scuffles have broken out between Polish police and farmers protesting in Warsaw. They'd marched towards Parliament and then the Prime Minister's office. It's the latest in a string of demonstrations across Europe against cheap Ukrainian imports, low supermarket prices and EU environmental rules, which farmers say are harming their livelihoods. Agriculture isn't often thought to be at the front line of technology, but farmers are increasingly turning to artificial intelligence and machine learning to make the way they work more efficient and more sustainable. Our correspondent Tony Waterman reports from the Paris Agricultural Fair.
In the realm of cataclysmic, earth-altering natural disasters, this scenario is often overlooked. The worldwide population of bees and other pollinating insects is plummeting, threatening global food supplies.
Today, we have up to 35% mortality of bee colonies raised in Europe. Last year in the US, the figure was 55%, so it's a massive collapse of the best-known pollinator. It's really critical because almost all of the fruits, vegetables and seeds we eat need pollination.
Christiane Lubat is the co-founder of BeeGuard, a company that makes temperature and weight sensors for beehives and AI-enabled cameras to precisely monitor bee activity. There are more than 5,400 connected hives across 12 countries, monitoring some 16,000 entries and exits every hour.
It's very important to measure the flow of bees because it ultimately gives us the pollination potential of a place. We can then cross-reference all the data, for example, climate data, yield data, foraging data, mortality data, and bee activity data to generate a macroscopic picture for farmers.
Farmers can monitor the information in real time to take immediate action to remedy problems that could affect crop yield.
Artificial intelligence is nothing new for farmers. Its first application was in the mid-1980s, and it was used to improve cotton production. But now the technology is widely used across the industry, helping farmers analyze soil, optimize irrigation, and even predict when animals like these cows will get sick.
The technology is increasingly seen as a crucial tool for future sustainability. Allianz is a federation that offers consulting services for some 80,000 cow, sheep, and goat breeders across France. It collects a massive amount of data. Milk production, for example, is tracked in 10-minute intervals. AI and machine learning then transforms that information into predictions, which Allianz says has an error rate of less than 1%.
We forecast milk production for large farmers, and with that accurate information, these producer groups can negotiate the best possible milk price. There's another application too. It helps prevent health problems in the animals.
At a time when pressure is mounting on the agricultural sector to go green and farmers are revolting over low wages and red tape across Europe, some farmers see AI as a great equalizer that could not only help them stay afloat, but battle climate change as well. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Paris, France.
The technology of the metaverse is already being used in classrooms, and experts say it's helping students learn faster and remember more. So is this the future of education? Our correspondent Ken Brown has been finding out.
Why read about Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel when you can be next to him while he paints it? The metaverse is ready to revolutionize the classroom. At the Rey Juan Carlos University in Madrid, a class of teaching graduates is training to bring virtual reality, or VR, to the next generation.
This is a dream for me, to use all these technologies in high school for the children, for them to reach the knowledge of Egypt, for example, and to see the pyramids, the tomb of Nefertari.
Spanish company Educa360 claims its learning programs boast up to 90% retention thanks to greater interaction. Fran Roncero is the creative director, and we met in the metaverse naturally.
So, Fran, this technology, what are the advances, what are the advantages?
Permite a los estudiantes aprender
It allows students to learn in a practical and experimental way because you are simulating real situations, taking them to other times and places. Virtual reality experiences activate more areas of your brain related to memory, attention, and emotion, which favor learning and retention.
Over 300 schools and 50,000 students are already using this technology in Spain, but for now, mostly in private schools.
The metaverse and these headsets are everywhere at the Mobile World Congress this year. It's a space where revenue is set to break the $1 trillion barrier by 2030. 20 billion of that coming in education.
But what about safety and security?
There has to be a code of ethics between the companies who manage and sell these spaces and what they do there. The problem is when they leave and go to commercial spaces. There they sell without many checks on who's buying. They leave that to the parents.
So, still trying to get your head around the metaverse? Don't worry, your children can get Michelangelo to explain it to you before the morning break. Ken Brown, CGTN, Barcelona.
And finally, engineers expect to lose contact with the moon lander Odysseus, cutting short the space mission 5 days after its sideways touchdown on the lunar surface. The uncrewed lander made a nail-biting final approach when a problem with its navigation system was identified. Engineers had to use an untested method to avoid what could have been a catastrophic crash landing. It's the first private spacecraft ever to reach the moon and the first from the United States since the Apollo mission more than 50 years ago. The headlines again. The US president raises hopes of a temporary truce between Israel and Hamas, which could see the release of more hostages and prisoners. Israeli strikes continue to target Gaza's southern city of Rafah as the Palestinian death toll nears 30,000. And Russia warns of inevitable conflict with NATO after the French president raises the possibility of European troops in Ukraine. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. Under influence of upper-level low trough and a low vortex, there could be some precipitation building up for next 2 days. By Wednesday, you could notice rain chances for parts of Spain, southern France, into much of Italian peninsula, majority of UK, portions of Poland stretching up to parts of Belarus, and for Scandinavia, northwestern Russia, you could expect a winter precipitation. Then getting to Thursday, the light rain will continue to occur in parts of Iberian Peninsula, stretching all the way up to portions of Germany, much of UK, Poland, into Belarus. And also, please keep your umbrellas handy if you're living across much of Italian Peninsula as well as western portion of the Balkans. Up to Scandinavia into northwestern Russia, I'm afraid the wintry weather will continue to occur. Temperature-wise, the daily highs are forecast to be ranging from freezing to the single digits for northern all the way to eastern Europe over the next 2 days. For central western Europe, the highs are forecast to be like around 10 degrees, even warmer down to Iberian Peninsula and the Balkans around the mid-teens. And our business and travel outlook 6 to 4 for Copenhagen, overcast sky for Stockholm with daily highs of 5.